Good evening, my friends. Lordy, lordy, it is late. It is almost 15 minutes late that we're getting started tonight, and I apologize. Logitech updated its software, and every time it does that, it breaks it and it won't talk to OBS anymore. Then I have to go back and install a previous version, which thankfully I keep backups of these things because this has happened before. And of course, if I had tested it this afternoon, I'd have realized I had a problem, but I didn't. But people are here. Gene is here, actually here on a Tuesday. And Dick and Dardine are here. Yeah, it is good to be back. And I was not here last week. I was on vacation, and I failed to warn people that I was going to be gone last week. So I apologize for that. I was thinking in my mind that maybe I'll do a short live from wherever I am on vacation, but I was having fun that evening, and I didn't even stop to think about it. So here we are. Tonight, we're going to be talking about volunteerism in the church, but first we're going to talk about some other stuff. We're going to be talking about volunteerism, when it works, when it doesn't work, and should we even be using the word volunteerism? So that'll be our main topic tonight. We've got lots of other good things to talk about, too. I'm sure that most people gave up on us 15 minutes ago, so hopefully they'll find us and watch at a later time. That's usually when most people watch us anyway these days. They catch us on Wednesday morning. All right. So, I also want to warn everybody that there will not be a live next week either, because next week we'll be having Karen's viewing on Tuesday evening, Karen Skanks. And so I'll be there on Tuesday night. We'll not be able to do a live. Let's go ahead and open with a word of prayer, shall we? Come, Holy Spirit, our helper and advocate. Open our hearts and minds this day. Entice us with your presence. Spark us with a word of life, a message that we may share with others as we seek to live Christ's love in the world. All this we ask in the name of God, who creates, redeems, and sustains us. Amen. All right, so this past week I was not in the pulpit because I was on vacation, and Joan Ritchie delivered the sermon, and it was about spiritual gifts. And this week we'll be going back into my sermon series again on what we believe as Christians and as Methodists, or at least as Wesleyans, if anybody's watching who's from a different tradition. And we've talked so far about the different things, the various main items that... Oh, Carolyn's with us. Hello, Carolyn. Good to have you here tonight. So far, we've talked about things that we have in common with all other denominations and all other traditions. This coming week, we'll be starting to talk about things that are specific to the Methodist tradition, that are special to us, things that we have to offer that nobody else has to offer. And this week, we're going to be talking about the concept of prevenient grace. And I'm not going to talk about it tonight, but I will give you the scriptures. They're pretty short, but there are several of them. First, we'll be using Joel chapter 2, verses 28 and 29. The prophet writes, "And afterward I will pour out my spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy, your old men will dream dreams, your young men will see visions. Even on my servants, both men and women, I will pour out my spirit in those days." So what does that have to do with prevenient grace? Good question. Tune in Sunday and find out. Then we move on to Acts chapter 17, verses 26 through 27. "From one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him, and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us." So what does that have to do with prevenient grace? Tune in Sunday and find out. And finally, Romans chapter 2, verses 13 through 15. "For it is not those who hear the law who are righteous in God's sight, but it is those who obey the law who will be declared righteous. Indeed, when Gentiles who do not have the law do by nature things required by the law, they are a law for themselves, even though they do not have the law. They show that the requirements of the law are written on their hearts, their consciences also bearing witness, and their thoughts sometimes accusing them, and at other times even defending them." What does that have to do with prevenient grace? Tune in Sunday and find out. And finally, I might have said finally before, there is one more. Titus chapter 2, verses 11 through 14. For the grace of God has appeared that offers salvation to all people. It teaches us to say no to ungodliness and worldly passions and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in this present age while we wait for the blessed hope, the appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior Jesus Christ, who gave himself for us to redeem us from all wickedness and to purify for himself a people that are his very own, eager to do what is good. What does that have to do with prevenient grace? Tune in Sunday and find out. All right, so moving on into the news this week, and I have a sad story to share, but I want to share it because I've talked in the past about how other denominations are just now starting to deal with topics that the Methodist Church began dealing with 30 years ago, in particular how to handle accusations of abuse within the church. In particular, when allegations are made that a pastor has done something abusive with a congregation member or is engaged in some kind of sexual misconduct. I want to bring that up this week because I've been talking in particular about the Baptist Church just now having its come to Jesus moment on this. But this week in the local news, there was an incident with the Methodist Church. And I'm going to share it because, well, some of you, if you're on the bishop's mailing list, you found out about it already through that. I knew some of it already from inside stuff because I knew what was going on in the congregations that were involved. But this is a story about how the Methodist Church handles these things, and we have protocols. So I'm not going to go into any names or anything, but one of our campus ministers, university chaplains, back in 2019, a formal complaint was received that one of the young women in the ministry there, a college student, said that, she was no longer a college student, but she was there in 2002 and 2003, and she said that she had been groomed by the pastor and the chaplain there, and that various things had been done to her. And so she made a formal complaint. There was an investigation. There was a just resolution. And the just resolution, the process that we have in the just resolution process means that there is a document that lists the facts of the case and that lists what we're going to do going forward. And it is considered a just resolution if the complainant and the accused both agree to the terms. And one of those was reached. The chaplain had to report what they had done to the university, which promptly terminated their employment there. And then they were put on a probationary period in the Methodist Church and had to go through 6 months of, I believe it's called forensic psychological evaluation to determine whether the person was fit to go forward. But so hoops to be jumped through. And the complainant agreed to these terms. The complainant supposedly was satisfied with these terms or would not have signed off on the agreement. And one of the terms in the agreement was that if any other allegations were to come forward, the pastor would immediately surrender his credentials and no longer be a Methodist pastor. So that happened. Not just one, but two more allegations came out. One from 2009 and one from 2015. Different young women who were students at that university. And so when the second allegation came forward, the pastor resigned and surrendered his credentials. And then when the third allegation was made, the bishop had no authority to act on that because he was no longer employed by the United Methodist Church at that point. So now it's so 2019 was when our bishop was informed by the victim that this had taken place, and she acted very quickly. Our process is spelled out in paper. We acted, and the person is no longer in ministry. Now, there will likely be more repercussions because the complainant has now filed suit in the District of Columbia. I believe that several people have been named in the suit, both the chaplain and some other people. Those are the facts that all agree on. Now, there are some other details that are not necessarily agreed upon, one of which is whether or not the district superintendent back in 2002, 2003 was aware of the situation. All of this is reported in religionnews.com. That's where I'm getting my information from, not from the bishop's official statement. The bishop's official statement basically covers all of this with the exception of the question about the district superintendent. So that needs to be looked at from another source. I don't have any official information on that. So obviously, very sad, very tragic, awful that this took place. And I hope that this woman gets whatever it is that she needs to heal and to move forward in her life. And the thing that is puzzling is that now that this individual, this former chaplain, former pastor, is no longer a United Methodist pastor, he has nonetheless been hired by a local congregation to serve as a layperson director of Christian education. So this is I'm not going to name that church either. Local churches can hire whoever they want. The bishop has control over who the appointed pastors are, but lay staff, we can hire whoever we want here. The bishop doesn't get involved in that. So a local Methodist congregation who is aware of all of this stuff has nonetheless hired this individual to serve as director of Christian education. Now that is puzzling. That congregation has not made a statement, has not responded to requests for information. Let's put it that way. So I did want to bring that up because I have talked about other denominations who are not equipped to deal with these situations yet. We are equipped to deal with these situations. I wish that it never happened. Obviously, all of our pastors do go through a psychological screening process before we can become pastors, but there is no tool that will determine whether or not somebody is going to snap down the road. We can determine whether or not they've already snapped, but we cannot determine whether or not they're going to snap down the road. No such tool exists, unfortunately. All right, moving on in the Methodist world, General Conference is supposed to happen next year, but the Delta variant of the COVID-19 is causing all kinds of logistical problems, and we're not sure what is going to happen with that. There's an article on it on uminsight.net. It's not a particularly detailed article because it's just up in the air. Other than that, if it is in fact going to happen next year, and I certainly hope it does, I don't know how we're going to get through the decisions we have to make if we don't have a general conference in the near future. A lot of hoops, a lot of logistics have to be solved between now and then. There was another article on UM Insight, that's um-insight.net, about the coronavirus. And, different states have taken different approaches to safety protocols. The CDC puts out their guidelines, and most states follow those guidelines. The state of Maryland takes the CDC guidelines and then gives the various counties tiers of protocols depending on what the what's the word I'm looking for? Depending on what the transmission rate is in the local counties. I think Maryland has done a great job of that. Other states, of course, have put flat restrictions across the board. Probably not the best way to go. I'm no expert. And then other states, of course, have done nothing, basically, other than to tell people to make their own decisions. And there's an article on um-insight.net that talks about a place in the Bible where that happened, the book of Judges. If you've never read the book of Judges, as the article says, do not read it when you're depressed, because it is one of the nastiest books in the Bible. It talks about what happened in early Israel, when Israel was a tribal federation before it had a king, before it had a centralized government, and it says that everyone did what was right in their own eyes. And what you see as you read the book is that over the course of the book, the people behaved worse and worse until something absolutely terrible happened at the end of Judges, which sets you then up, which then sets up the next book in the Bible where it talks about the creation of the monarchy and the kingdom. So why do I bring that up? Well, obviously there are times in life when we have to make our own decisions, and there are times when we have to be told what to do. That's why we have governments. Now, I'm a libertarian, and I believe that governments should only intervene when there's no better way to deal with a situation. That's when the government needs to intervene. We can't just tell people, do whatever you do in your own house. You know, I remember my dad getting in an argument with somebody once, and they said, whatever I do in my house is my own business. My dad said, so you're saying it's okay to commit murder if you do it in your own house? That doesn't make any sense. So obviously, we can't just let people do whatever they want to do. We need governments to tell us that some things are off limits. And the question that each state has struggled with is, to what degree do we tell people you must do the following things when it comes to pandemic protocols? And each state has drawn the line in a different place. And all I'm going to say is a line must be drawn. The states that have chosen not to draw a line, in fact, some states, or one state, and two states in particular, forbade local jurisdictions from drawing lines. Not only did the state not say this is what you're going to do, they said nobody in the state can tell anybody what to do. And that's when everybody does what is right in their own eyes, and that's when bad things happen. And it's no surprise then that those are the states that have the worst caseloads right now. All right, moving on, getting into spirituality and health. We're going to get to our main topic in just a minute, but first, a couple interesting things about living better that I saw on studyfinds.org. Everybody knows we're supposed to drink a lot of water, right? Everybody tells you got to drink 5 glasses of water a day. You got to drink 8 glasses of water a day. Some people say that if the water's got caffeine in it, it doesn't count. Other people say that's nonsense. If it's got water in it, it's good. Go ahead and count that. So the current guidelines are actually that women should drink 8 glasses of water a day, and that what is it for men? 12 glasses a day. Most people get nowhere near that much water, but the new study, the study that was just released, says that we've always known how important hydration is for lots of different body functions, but it appears now that there is actually a correlation between your long-term heart health and how well you stay hydrated over the course of your life. Being dehydrated, as most of us are, for years on end, will cause heart problems later on. So drink your water, folks. Last thing on living well is cholesterol. Everybody knows you don't want to have high cholesterol, right? Because it causes heart problems. Well, apparently we now know, according to a Duke study, that it also causes cancer problems, in that people with high cancer affects people with high cholesterol differently than it affects people with low cholesterol. The cancer cells do better, grow faster, and are stronger when they are growing in a person with high cholesterol. And also, it apparently hampers your body's natural ability to fight the cancer yourself. So, watch your cholesterol numbers, take the pills if you need them, eat healthy. Finally, the main topic for tonight. And this is a good topic to follow up Joan's sermon this week, because Joan's sermon was on spiritual gifts, and the purpose of the sermon was to help people discern ways that they could be serving the church. And in some cases, that might mean that you've got the spiritual gifts, you need to step up and fulfill a leadership void that exists in the church right now, and we do have some leadership voids in some areas. It also could mean that you're being called to start a new ministry, not fill one that's currently open, but to start something that we're not doing at all. So those are different forms of volunteerism, right? So there was an interesting article in Patheos today about volunteerism in the church. It was called what do they call it? What you should know about volunteering at your church. But before we go into that, let me say that when I was coming up, we were told not to use the word volunteer in the church. So I always get a kick out of it when people say, "Yeah, I was voluntold for this job," and I didn't volunteer for it. I was voluntold for it. Well, of course, the Bible doesn't talk about volunteering to do God's work. The Bible talks about us being servants. And that's the way we were always encouraged to talk about work in the church, service in the church, to call it service. That we're not volunteering this morning, we're serving this morning. I'm not a volunteer for the church, I'm a minister in the church. When we were, last week, when we were visiting colleges in North Carolina, we saw a Baptist church in, where was it? It was at, can't remember the name of the town that it was in, but their sign said, "Every member a minister," right? So, volunteer probably isn't the best word to use, but that's the word the article used. You can find that on patheos.com. And they listed things that these are the things that they said every person should know about volunteering in church. One is that you should understand the purpose and mission of your church. So if you're going to be serving your church in some capacity, you need to understand how the thing you are doing now contributes to the purpose of your church and the mission of your church. Certainly that would make for a more rewarding experience for you, because if you're doing something and you cannot connect in your mind how what I'm doing today in some ways serves the purpose of the church, that's going to be a more frustrating ministry for you. It says obviously you need to pray through the volunteer opportunity, pray on it, and that's so this Sunday's Joan talked about discerning our spiritual gifts. Whenever we're asked to do something for the church, I'm not going to say what every time we should pray on. Sometimes we already know that God has called us to do something and we just don't want to do it. But then somebody comes to us and says, "Hey, we were hoping that you would take on this ministry. We think we'd be great for it." And that's just the nail in the coffin that God has already laid before you. So perhaps it isn't always necessary. But if it's something that you had not thought about before and they're calling upon you to serve ministry, yeah, you should pray on that. Talk to God about it. Obviously, some ministry positions have background checks these days. Anything relating to children is going to have a background check. Anything that's got to involve transporting people in a motor vehicle is going to involve a different and even more involved background check. So you need to be aware of that. It says that you should expect to make good use of your time. In other words, if you volunteer to do something, it is a reasonable expectation on your part that when you show up, people are going to put you to work in such a way that you're going to walk away feeling like you made a contribution today. We're going to come back to that one in just a minute. Actually, several of these. You need to understand that you're part of a group effort. That most of the positions that we volunteer for or are called upon to serve in are part of a team, lead a team, or you're part of a team following another leader. But they're almost all team efforts. Certainly, the church is a team. So it's not just about what do you want to do. It's about what is God calling upon your team to do. And of course, understand that it is more blessed to give than to receive. So when I was looking at this list and I was thinking about it, I was thinking to myself, when I look at the times that volunteerism hasn't worked, in other words, when people have been called upon to serve in a ministry and it has not gone well, and sometimes it becomes apparent very early on that it's not going well. Sometimes it takes a lot longer to realize that things have not gone in the direction that we thought they were going to go in, and it was not a good surprise, but a bad surprise. One of the things that really messes up ministries in the local church is when people simply do not agree on the mission of the church. Um, if they do not agree on the expectations of members, of membership, if they do not agree on what the expectations are of the staff and the pastor. And, I've been in multiple situations where it seemed to me that was, in fact, the nature of the problem was that there were people involved in key ministry positions that did not believe that the church's job was to make disciples, that they did not believe the church's job was to transform the community. They had an entirely different goal for the life of the church. I guess a worst case scenario is people who would say, well, the church's job is to grow. And to grow, we need more money, and we need more money so we can grow. And sort of, so the idea was that the church is there to provide religious goods and services to consumers. And, since the consumers are the customers and the customer is always right, and whatever it is, people want to be happy with the church. That's what our job is to give them. So if you're going down that road, then, challenging people, that's off the table altogether. Unless some people want that product, then you challenge those people, but you don't challenge anybody else. If people want to grow, you offer them an opportunity to grow. If they don't want to grow, that's fine too. If they want transformation, great, offer it. If they don't want transformation, offer them something else. When people do not agree that the mission of the church is to make disciples for the transformation of the world, you're going to have ministries going way off the rails. It's sad, but it's common. And certainly I've been in conflict with leaders. In this particular example I'm going to give you, it certainly didn't happen here, but one of the churches I used to serve had a confirmation retreat every year. So the kids in the confirmation class would go off to a campground for the weekend and finish up their class and do their discerning over whether or not they were going to join the church when they got back. And I always went on that retreat with the youth leader and the confirmation students. And I had a leader get very frustrated with that and said, your job is not to be there with those confirmands. Your job is to be here preaching on Sunday morning. Well, it just so happens that I have a written job description in the Book of Discipline in the Methodist Church, and one of my jobs in that job description is to the pastor's job description includes actually teaching the confirmation class. So technically, I'm supposed to be the teacher for the class. So yeah, actually, I am supposed to be there with the kids, but that's actually part of my job. Now, I don't teach that class anymore because the best confirmation curriculum that are out there now are year-long confirmation curriculum. And they're designed to be taught during Sunday school, and I'm just not available to do that. But I am certainly involved in the conference. I wasn't involved as much as I have traditionally been this past year because everything was crazy with the pandemic and all. But if I'm not going to teach the class, then I'm certainly going to be going on the field trips with the class and spending time with the kids. The previous time what I did was I taught the Methodist unit in it. Anyway, my point being that if people don't agree on what the pastor's job is, not just the pastor, but people don't agree on what the music minister's job is, if people don't agree with what the church administrator's job is, if people don't agree on what the youth minister's job is, then there's going to be conflict around how well that person is executing their job. And the people who are volunteering with those people, they're going to be dead center in that conflict. So the more consensus we have over what the purpose of the church is and what the purpose of the people who serve the church is, the better these ministries are going to go. Another way that I've seen volunteerism sort of go bad is when people are recruited to help with something and they show up for something and then they are not utilized. In some cases, it's not that they're not utilized; it's that they're not utilized efficiently, in some cases, it's that they're just not utilized at all. One of the churches I served once had a bunch of dinners. Wasn't this church? And I remember the first dinner they had when I was there. They're always saying, "We need more help. We need more help. Please come out and help." And I said, "All right, I'll go out there and help." And so I went into the kitchen, and when I walked into the kitchen, I was immediately greeted by somebody. Greeted, by the way, is a generous word for what happened. They said, when I walked in, they said, "Do something or get out of the way." And I said, "Okay, well, what do you want me to do?" And they said, "I want you to get out of the way." And that was the last time I went in the kitchen to help with the dinner at that church. Unfortunately, I was not the only person to have that experience. So, and the funny thing is, and then the next year, a month before the dinner, the same conversation would take place. "I don't know if we're going to be able to do this dinner anymore. We just don't have enough people coming out to help." Okay, well, so we need to be willing to utilize people who do volunteer. Um, and that example I gave you was an extreme example. I'll tell you the example that is more common now, though, is when you assemble a team to do something. And maybe it's a traditional Methodist style committee with a chairperson, or maybe it's more of an ad hoc team or a committee. And there is a chairperson or a committee chairperson or a team leader or someone, and they've got anywhere from 6 to 9 people supposedly serving on their team, but they never have any meetings, they never have any conversations. The leader ends up doing all the work themselves, and sometimes that's the way they like it. Other times they hate it and they complain about it, but at the same time they don't take the steps. And that usually happens because the person who is leading, supposed to be leading the team, really doesn't want to lead, isn't comfortable leading. Maybe they're an introvert. They don't like picking up the phone and calling people. They don't like running meetings. They don't like having to facilitate a conversation about what we're going to do. And so that might mean that they're not the right person for the job. Maybe they should be on that team, but they shouldn't lead that team. Of course, then who is going to lead? Very often, if you've got 6 people on a team, none of them want to be that leader. So any one of them you put in the leadership position, they're just going to do it all themselves because they don't want to have to, because, managing teams is work. It's why a lot of people turn down management promotions because they don't want to deal with all that stuff. I understand that. Another time that volunteerism doesn't work is when somebody kind of goes rogue. In other words, they're serving in a ministry in the church, and there's something that they want to do, and the answer that the church gives is no, for whatever reason, and they do it anyway, or they do something without asking the question that needs to be asked. Here's the best example I've ever heard in my life. Thankfully, this was not one of my churches. It was a church that neighbored one of my churches. So every church has either a trustees committee or a maintenance team or something like that. And this one particular church had that. They also had the Methodist men's group at this church had its own handyman club. And they would, we used to call them piddlers, right? People who piddle around the church doing things. Often it's a retired guy who likes to, go around, greasing hinges and stuff like that. That's what these guys were, and they would see something that they would think needed to be fixed or taken care of, and they would do it. Well, they didn't consult with the trustees on anything they did, and if it's just oiling hinges, that's no big deal. But these guys one day said, "Oh, look at our heating bill. It's way too high. We need to insulate this building better." And they went out and they bought that like 6 mil semi-transparent plastic sheathing, and they stapled it over all of the windows in the church. Okay, so all of the windows became semi-opaque when they did this. And better still, this was a church that didn't have air conditioning, and these were functioning double hung windows that now could not be opened because these guys had stapled plastic sheathing over all of them. Two-story building. They did the top floor and the bottom floor. Did all of it. And the trustees came in and they're like, what have you done? And of course, they told him take it back down again, and they didn't want to take it back down again. And wouldn't you like to be involved in that conversation? Oh my goodness. Okay. And the final way that volunteering can go bad. And by the way, these are all sort of counterpoints to the points in the article. People who volunteer for the wrong reasons. You know, when I worked for the Boy Scouts, some of our long-term professionals had developed sort of a cynical view of the motives that some volunteers have in volunteer organizations, and in scouting, they some of these guys had developed the opinion that badges and achievement awards were the currency that we used to pay the volunteers in scouting, and if we were to stop giving out the recognition items, they would stop working. And I'm sure that for some of them that's probably true, but that's certainly not the case for most volunteers. It's not the case for volunteers for the most part in any organization, but every organization does have a few people who go into a volunteer program either because they're going to be either leading or just serving on a team. They're expecting some kind of recognition, some kind of thanks, and that's really the reason they're doing it. They're doing it for self-esteem reasons, and I'm not saying that self-esteem is certainly helped when you're doing good for the world, okay? But your self-esteem needs to be rooted in the work itself that you're doing, not the recognition that you get for it, or even for the gratitude that you get for it. Anybody who has worked with a food kitchen or anything that has to do with homeless people, anything that has to do, good grief, any kind of relief at work effort at all. Anybody who's done that knows that there are going to be people who are extremely appreciative of the help that they're getting and act like it. And there are going to be other people who don't act like they're appreciative. And very often it's because they're going through a crisis or a trauma, and they're just in a very bad place psychologically right now, and they're snapping at everybody. And it's not that they don't necessarily appreciate what's being done. It's just that they're not in a position right now where they can acknowledge it properly. Sometimes they don't appreciate it, and there's nothing more frustrating than handing something of value to a person who really needs it and have that person respond with, "Is this all I get?" That's very frustrating, but it happens. It happens all the time. And when you volunteer, you need to be aware that sort of thing happens. If you were counting on that person going, "Thank you so much for the help," then you're not spiritually at the place yet where you should be doing that ministry. If you're looking for a psychological reward for doing ministry, it has to be in the knowledge that you're serving God and serving your neighbor and loving God and loving your neighbor, not in the way anybody reacts to that. Now, am I saying we shouldn't thank people? Of course not. Am I saying we shouldn't recognize people? Of course not, because we do need to recognize people. Now, when I was earlier in ministry, when I was younger, early in my ministry, I didn't fully understand this because I felt that, look, I don't need recognition for the things that I'm doing. Becky and I used to joke about this. When we're working hard on something, we don't expect recognition or thanks for it, but you better not complain. As long as you don't complain, we're good. We don't need thank you, but do not complain when we're working hard, because we don't like that at all. That's not a very healthy attitude either. But as I've now been in ministry for 25 years, hey, Sandy, I realize now that there are long spells in ministry, and I'm sure this is true in other types of volunteer work, especially anything that could be considered public service, which would be a type of ministry, whether it's labeled a ministry or not, where you don't see the results of what you're doing, where you start to wonder if what you're doing is making a difference. I'm talking about burnout issues. And, burnout does not come from working too hard. Burnout comes from working for a long time hard on something that you no longer think is actually doing any good. And we need to be aware that when people work long term in positions, they go through these spells. And when they're going through these spells, a pat on the back or thank you or public recognition might be exactly what that person needs. But we need to know what that person needs, because some people really appreciate being recognized publicly. Some people hate it. Some people really appreciate private thanks, and miss it when they don't get it, but they do not want public thanks. Other people want it in public. One of the most challenging things I ever had to deal with was when I had a person stepping down from a ministry position, and I knew this person did not like public recognition, but really appreciated private recognition. Well, this was sort of a politicized situation. Some people in the church were very unhappy that this person was stepping down from this ministry, and they wanted to make a big public deal out of this. And they made it very clear that if I didn't make a big public thank you for all of your years of service thing, they were going to be very upset with me. So I had to choose between upsetting those people versus upsetting the person who I was really supposed to be concerned about, who was the person in ministry. And I'll confess, I took the coward's way out. I decided that I'd rather deal with one upset person than a dozen upset people, and I did the public recognition. I had to do it at 3 services, so I actually surprised this individual 3 times and gave him 3 different gifts. So it wasn't like giving a gift and taking it back and giving a gift and take it back. So by the end of the morning, the person was pretty much irritated. Oh, if I had to do that over again, I'd do it differently. The things that we learn as we go through life. Anyway, so don't go into a position or a ministry or a service expecting gratitude, but if you're responsible for somebody else's ministry, express that gratitude. All right, that is everything that I've got for you tonight, folks. Do not forget that those of you who attend Mount Zion, we have our big Welcome Back Sunday on September 12th. That's when we are officially rolling out our new 11 o'clock fellowship hour, which we're doing the dry runs for right now. I was not there on Sunday. I was on vacation, but I understand that it happened. I hope it went well. The one person I talked to who wasn't there long said it did go well. So let's see. Anything else that we need to talk about today? I think that is it. I feel like I'm a little bit out of touch because I've been gone for a week. There were some people when I left that were sort of waiting on some news, and I don't know what happened with those things yet, so I don't have any prayer requests to lift up to you, but I will be making some phone calls this week and catching up with people and finding out what's going on. And then next week I won't be here on Tuesday night, but Sunday anyway, we'll have some prayer concerns for you. Let us close with the serenity prayer, shall we? God, give me grace to accept with serenity the things that cannot be changed, the courage to change the things which should be changed, and the wisdom to distinguish the one from the other, living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, taking, as Jesus did, this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever in the next. Amen. All right, folks, thank you for joining tonight. I'll see you all Sunday.